I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The accused killer is a 26-year-old who some are hailing as a hero, but many others are calling a murderer. Here's the story. It's the case everyone is talking about, the shocking targeted murder in the streets of New York City. Brian Thompson, the frontman and CEO for the nation's largest health insurance company, United Healthcare. He was in New York for a big investor meeting. That meeting was scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. at the Hilton Hotel. Thompson was staying across the street at a smaller boutique hotel. At around 6:45, he left his hotel and crossed the street. That's when the suspect approached him from behind, shooting him 3 times and killing him. After a 6-day manhunt, this man, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And now prosecutors are putting all their evidence together, from surveillance images of the alleged killer to ballistics gathered at the scene and the so-called ghost gun that Mangione was carrying when he was arrested. Also, fingerprints and the various writings discovered by police. Meanwhile, Mangione is now assembling his own defense team to deal with all these charges, including murder. This is a big case. A huge case, obviously, the highest profile crime that's taken place in quite some time that we've covered here on this program and on this network. Take a look at some of the headlines now that Mangione has hired someone. Luigi Mangione hires high-profile New York defense lawyer. Suspect in CEO's killing hires high-profile attorney, as official indicates extradition fight. Luigi Mangione, suspect in Brian Thompson slaying, retains high-profile New York attorney. Luigi Mangione hires high-profile lawyer. I've seen the headlines myself. I heard the headlines myself, and it brings us to our first question in our investigation. And it's an obvious one. Who is Mangione's new high-profile attorney? I've got good news. We've got a picture and we've got a name. Let me show it to you. Take a look. There she is. Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Okay. That answers part of the question, but like, who is she? What kind of attorney is she? How aggressive? What do you think her approach to all of this is going to be? Gonna need some help for that. We need a New York insider. Joining me, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor in New York, Sam Braverman. Sam, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Okay.
My pleasure, Vinny.
All right. I want you to introduce her to the country. Who is this high-profile New York attorney who's representing Luigi Mangione right now?
Well, she didn't hire me, so there's some other high-profile lawyers out there. Now, Karen is great, super smart, super well-experienced. She worked in the prosecutor's office for decades and really was a chief over there and in charge of assembling their most high-profile cases. And so she certainly knows what she's doing.
So what?
In addition to that, she's been married to Mark, who's one of the highest profile lawyers in New York right now. And so she has been, watching the work that he does for the last couple of decades. And so she knows the ins and outs, everything she needs to do.
I'm glad you mentioned that's Mark Agnifilo, her husband. Take a look at this, because he has a pretty high profile client as well right now in New York. Mr.
Yes,
Agnifilo is representing Diddy, and his wife, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, is representing Luigi Mangione. So, Sam,
two of the biggest.
Yeah, 2 of the biggest. Give me how does this happen? How does someone like Luigi Mangione end up with an attorney like that? What is it? Is it a referral? Is it reputation?
For sure.
How do you think this all went down?
For sure, it's a referral. He himself has no idea who these people are, and so he talked to people and said, I need to put together a team. And one of the things about this case, which is surprising and certainly didn't occur before, but now becomes more common, is the public sourcing of funds to pay for these lawyers. Like the case with the shooting case up in Minnesota, where most of the funds came from out of state. This guy's going to get funding from around the country and his family's got some money, and they could put together a real team. So first and foremost, you want a former prosecutor, somebody who's intimately aware of that office, the decision-making process, who you need to talk to. If you're going to work out a plea, what's the plea, the structures of a plea agreement. And so somebody who knows it, like Karen does, would be a great place to start.
And you mentioned the public funding of this. Apparently, we checked just before the show, his legal fund, and remember, his family is the 1% of the 1% of Americans, right? Which makes it kind of ironic that they're raising money for him, but they have, and it's over $134,000 so far. Now, I know that won't cover a case like this. I know that the prices escalate, obviously, for experts and everything else that you may need, but this is early on, and it's at $134,000. So, Sam, what does a lawyer do when you first get a case like this? So let's say Karen Agnifilo gets the case. What's the first thing that she's doing? Is she trying to make contact with her client? Is she trying to make contact with the prosecutor? What is she doing first?
For sure. So the first thing she's going to do is she's going to drive out to Pennsylvania and go visit him. And she's going to sit down with him, meet him in the jail, and spend a couple of days with him, just introducing herself and learning who he is, getting his background, getting his temperature, because she's got a long ride with this guy. And there may be a point in time where she says, I need you to take a plea in your best interest. And if he's not 100% on board with the way she's approaching the case, he's not going to hear a good message. And so she needs to build a trust relationship with him right at the very beginning. And so I think days out there is that. In addition to which, they're preparing originally, in the beginning of this case, for the extradition hearing. And the extradition hearing is because the goal is to prove to the judge in Pennsylvania that this is the guy they're looking for, not whether he's guilty of the crime, but is he the guy they're looking for. The extradition hearing is going to show quite a bit of information about the state's case in New York. And so she's going to be out there watching that. That's her beginning of the case.
So what type of lawyer is she? Is she going to be the type of lawyer who's going to, after a motions hearing or after an appearance in court, an arraignment or whatever, is going to come out on the steps and address the public? Is she going to provide any information to try to shape the story, shape how people are talking about this case?
I would guess no, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that she's a former DA, and the DAs don't do a lot of those step talks. There are DAs like Bragg will make statements, but Bragg's underlings don't. And so she was a reporter to Bragg for a long time, but I think it's unlikely for that reason. Second reason is that there's so much talk already about the case. She doesn't need to generate interest in the case. It's already there. And so for that reason, it doesn't help her to do it, particularly since there's so much evidence that ties her guy to New York. There's no upside to being out on the steps every day and having a chit chat. I'd wait till the case develops.
Now, the other thing that people are talking about, Sam, and I mean, it almost became the story in all this, amazingly, was we talked about $134,000 being raised for someone who's on video allegedly committing a cold-blooded assassination, right? But a lot of the public sentiment is supporting him as somewhat of a hero and is in the same breath villainizing a man who was just walking into a meeting who gets shot from behind by an assassin, right? They villainized Brian Thompson. How does that manifest itself inside of a courtroom?
I think very far down the road, if you're trying this case, you are looking for people who have a sense that the system is broken and unable to fix itself. And so sometimes you're looking for what you might say dysfunctional, kind of the anarchist jury that's going to say, we have to take care of things on our own. And so sometimes in a murder case, a good friend of mine was from North Carolina, and he wanted me to come down and try murder cases. And he said, there are only two elements to murder cases in North Carolina. Did the guy need killing, and did you have standing to do it? I guess to some extent, that's where this is going, right? If you're going to try this case and you're looking for an acquittal, you need somebody to say, this guy needed killing. Because If you can't get a jury to think that way, then of course it's just vigilante murder. And then the other problem is, who has the right to affect that on behalf of society? Then you're going to sell the idea that this kid was a victim of that circumstance. Now, that's anarchy. I get it. But that's the sell.
Right,
It's like the Rittenhouse case, right? The Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse was the name of the kid up in Minnesota. And he got, I don't know, almost $1 million in his GoFundMe account to pay for legal fees because everybody who was on that side of the issue thought this guy was, you know, betrayed by a society that had gotten broken, and he needed to defend it. And so he killed a guy who was going to kill him. And so he got an enormous amount of money. And that was roughly the theory of the case.
All right, Sam, we're almost out of time, but this is one really important question I've been wondering about. This is New York. You know New York inside and out, right? So
yeah,
we cover cases around the country. And if I look at this case, in many jurisdictions, it's like you're convicted, it's life without the possibility of parole. There's very little room for any negotiation. Where is the room for a potential plea in this case?
It has to be that this kid, Luigi, one of the Mario brothers, he has to absolutely fall on his sword early if he wants a decent offer. I would say that the likelihood is that Bragg is going to hold out and not offer him a manslaughter because there's simply nothing from Bragg's perspective that mitigates the guilt. You know, they'll give you a manslaughter if there's something that mitigates it. You've got a terrible backstory in your life. You've got some complications about the victim. You've got some complications about the methodology by which this took place. You've got mental health issues. None of those things are present. This is the definition of premeditated, lying in wait murder. And so Bragg doesn't have an incentive to tell New York City that I'm going to give this a manslaughter. I think unless the early push by Karen and her team is for that, it would surprise me if there's an early manslaughter plea. You'd have to have a real change in circumstances, and that's probably way down the road.
Sam Braverman, our New York legal insider, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure, Vinnie, anytime.
Coming up next, did the killer work alone?
Is there any indication that anybody else was helping him from the inside, you know, as far as tracking the CEO's movements?
Well, once again, we're still working this investigation very hard. It's not at its conclusion yet.
How we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please. This was a real-life soap opera.
And I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
That anybody else was helping him from the inside, you know, as far as tracking the CEO's movements?
Well, once again, we're still working this investigation very hard. It's not at its conclusion yet. That could come out during our investigation, but as of right now, we have no indication that that took place.
All right, that's what investigators were saying early on, right? There was nothing to indicate that other people were involved here. Now, journalist Ken Klippenstein posted what he claimed to be the full transcript of Luigi Mangione's manifesto to his website. According to Newsweek, they were able to verify the copy is a legitimate transcription done by law enforcement authorities. Court TV has not been able to independently confirm its authenticity. We took the manifesto obtained by Klippenstein and had one of our producers voice it over. I want you to pay extra close attention to the first couple of sentences.
To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, These parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the U.S. by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. The reality is, these have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed. For example, Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago. The problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty.
I sense a little narcissism in the whole thing, but let's go back to those first couple sentences. To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. Which brings us to our next question in our investigation. Should we trust him? Did the killer work alone? Did the killer work alone? Could he have pulled this off by himself? Everything that happened here, the timing, the escape, all of it. Joining me from New York, retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, and author of the book Deceived, Mike King in the Big Apple. Also with us, retired NYPD officer Mike Gould. So I'll be using both of your last names as well as your first names just to avoid any confusion here. Mike King, what does your gut tell you here? Did the killer work alone?
I think he did, Vinny. I think there are a couple of things that support that. Not only this verbal, written communication that says, hey, I'm the one that did it alone. And I think you're spot on with the idea of narcissism, because he wants everyone to know that he's the guy that stepped up and took things into his own hands. There were some things that led us to kind of wonder if there was somebody else involved. I think those, as we've gotten more facts, have kind of pushed things off to the side and brought us back, swinging the pendulum back to this is a person who worked alone, put this thing together. And I love the fact that you have now put into words with that script, the manifesto, because it tells us so much about so many parts and pieces of this case.
Absolutely. All right, Mike Gould, I want to put a little timeline and map up on the screen for a second so we remind everyone what happened that morning. It was 6:17 a.m. that the shooter exited the subway and then heads to a nearby Starbucks, right? So he gets to Starbucks at 6:17. Then at 6:39, the shooter arrives at the Hilton and begins to lay in wait for his victim. 6:44 a.m., Brian Thompson, the victim, shot from behind, and the suspect flees through an alleyway. 6:48, the suspect enters Central Park on his bike. And Mike Gould, one thing that a lot of people were very suspect about was the fact that he was waiting just 5 minutes for his victim, lying in wait just 5 minutes, as if he had some sort of inside information. And that's why I think a lot of people were thinking that maybe he's got some help here. What do you think? Did the killer work alone?
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. It's an honor actually to be on with both you and Mike. I agree up until this point with both of you. I think that wasn't a big, these locations are very close proximity, so he could be surveilling him from 100 yards away and then run 100 yards. So he could position himself pretty quickly without a great deal of help. I don't think, as you said, his narcissism wouldn't allow for another superhero in this event. And that's, of course, how he sees himself, and that's how a lot of people see him. This isn't the first time anti-establishment heroes have taken, this is part of our history since our founding in 1776. In 1865, Booth shot Lincoln, and there was a whole bunch of people that supported Booth. So this is nothing new. But I do think he was working alone. I think the NYPD at this point, I don't trust him, but I trust the NYPD. They don't sleep. So they've been working on this case 24/7. They know what this guy had for breakfast at this point. They know everything about him, or at least they should know. So if they had an indication there was a co-conspirator, they would have, I think, announced it by now.
You know, Mike King, one of the things that we heard in the manifesto, he mentioned patience, like acknowledging his own patience. How much patience do you think it took to pull this off alone, right? Because apparently he's not getting help from anyone.
Exactly, and I think the thing that's really interesting is we have to take into account that he was there for about 10 days before this event. We know that Thompson arrived into town a couple of days before the event. I suspect that he walked through this scenario of where he was going to go, what his escape route was going to be, and where he was going to potentially link up with Thompson along the way multiple times. And you think about the fantasy that these people go through, Vinnie. Imagine how this was working him up as he went through this day after day, building up the courage and preparing for this grand performance that he was going to do on that morning. And I hate to put it in terms like that, but heck, we're close to 42nd Street. He was working through a play, and he was preparing over and over again. And that's where we see the organization level of this particular person.
All right, Mike and Mike staying with us. Coming up next, how well planned was the murder? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the targeted murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson and his accused killer, Luigi Mangione. It's a bizarre case for many reasons, like the suspect's background and the public's reaction to this assassination. Here's the story. The arrest of 26-year-old Luigi Mangione for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson answered one question, but has raised a whole lot more. Mangione is accused of traveling by bus to New York City to assassinate Thompson, then escaping the city by foot, bike, cab, and bus. He ended up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where he was arrested eating a hash brown at McDonald's. Now, everyone is looking at the steps he allegedly took to carry out this killing. And many are also wondering about the items that were seized when he was taken into custody. Thousands of dollars of cash, a ghost gun and silencer, a fake New Jersey identification, and a series of writings. All of this leading everyone to wonder how and why a young, smart, good-looking, and extremely wealthy Ivy Leaguer ended up locked up facing a potential of life behind bars. There was one thing that was clear from the beginning. Once we saw the video, it was clear to me, it was clear to you, it was clear to everyone that this was someone who was there to take out Brian Thompson, to assassinate Brian Thompson. There was no other possible motive involved here other than ending his life for some reason, right? Whatever that reason was. But every indication was the object of what was going on there was to take him out and get away. Take a listen to the New York City Police Commissioner talking about it.
Good morning, everyone. In Midtown Manhattan early this morning, 50-year-old Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot and killed in what appears, at this early stage of our investigation, to be a brazen, targeted attack. This does not appear to be a random act of violence. The suspect approached from behind and fired several rounds, striking the victim at least once in the back and at least once in the right calf. Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target. I want to be clear. At this time, Every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
Which brings us to our next question in our investigation. How well planned was the murder? Right? It's a planned, targeted attack, but how well planned was it? Obviously, he's in custody, so that's a problem. So it's not the perfect crime. But how about the planning and the preparation for all of this? Let's bring in our experts. Joining me from New York City, retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, and the author of the book Deceived, Mike King. Also with us, retired NYPD officer Mike Gould. So what I want to do is walk through some of the timeline here and then stop and then get your analysis of the planning and how well planned or how not well planned this was. We begin November 24th. It's believed that at some time on November 24th, the suspect gets on a Greyhound bus that is traveling from Atlanta to New York City. Now, investigators unaware of what time or how he bought the ticket, but the bus originated in Atlanta, but it's unclear when he actually boarded, although he was reportedly spotted on the bus in Washington, D.C. November 24th, 10:11 p.m., the suspect arrives at the Port Authority terminal, and the suspect stayed in New York City for 10 days. So floating around the city for 10 days. Also, November 24th, 11 p.m., following his arrival in New York City, the suspect checks into the High New York City hostel. The suspect wore a mask most of the time. Surveillance video caught his face because he was flirting with the woman working at the desk, and she apparently asked to see his smile. And that's the image that was used in the search for the suspect here. So let's start with this, the beginning parts of all of this. Mike King and Mike Gould are with us. Mike Gould, your thoughts about up until this point of what has taken place, the planning, the travel into the city, being in the city, and then deciding to stay in a hostel.
Yeah, Vinnie. So I think, I think it was relatively well planned. Of course, he got caught, so he couldn't account for every eventuality. And there's very rare perfect crime. So sooner or later, something's going to happen. But from the very beginning, by virtue of taking a bus, he eluded, airline security. Obviously, he eluded a lot of people because it's relatively you can travel by bus without pretty much anybody identifying you. And not being questioned or identified. So that, by virtue of all of those steps he took, it was well planned. But I don't think he expected, and frankly, I didn't, it's a singular homicide in New York City. I don't think he thought he was going to be an international fugitive an hour after he shot the guy. So I think that disrupted a lot of his plans. Of course, you're going to make mistakes. He got his mask taken off. It kind of reminds me, Vinnie, of Taxi Driver, though. 10 days is a long time to fantasize about these in being delusional and figuring this out. Travis Bickle in De Niro's movie, that's all he did. He drove around in a taxi 24 hours a day and fantasized and practiced in the mirror how to shoot. When you see this kid shooting his gun, he was very casual. People think he's a firearm expert. He probably did that behavior 1,000 times looking in a mirror. So, again, this is not, to me, as uncommon. It reminds me of the Son of Sam. Same thing, playing cat and mouse with the media. Answer is, it was pretty well planned, but not planned well enough.
All right, I want to move through a few more of the moments here in our timeline. November 29th, the suspect leaves the hostel on the 29th. November 30th, the suspect checks into the hostel and books a room using a fake New Jersey identification. He shared a room with two guys on the 4th floor for multiple days, wore a mask most of the time, and apparently also while he was eating. Then we go to the December 4th, 5:30 a.m., the morning of the shooting. The suspect is seen on surveillance leaving the Upper West Side area near his hostel. He is holding something investigators believe to be an e-bike battery. December 4th, 6:15 a.m., surveillance footage captures the suspect exiting a subway station, the 57th Street and F train station. And then on December 4th, 6:17 a.m., after exiting the subway, the suspect is then seen on surveillance at a nearby Starbucks, where he buys 2 energy bars and a water bottle. Police recovered the items in a nearby trash, and they were apparently matched to Luigi Mangione's fingerprints. So, Mike King, I know you're in the city and you've been going around to these locations, including the hostel and the Starbucks. What are your thoughts about retracing the steps and how well planned Mangione's master plan is up until this point?
Well, I know you know the city really well, and Gold, I'm looking forward to his response on this, Vinny. But what I wanted to do is really kind of vicariously roll in the dirt and walk that area and take a couple of different routes down, the subway down, and actually get out at 57th Street. And I've heard conflicting reports of whether he really came out of the subway or was just captured on the camera outside the subway entrance. But I wanted to know, how long does that take? I wanted to know how long it took at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So I drove that at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'll tell you, for people who are afraid of driving in New York City, the time to go there is at 6 o'clock in the morning, because it is really nice driving and you can cover a lot of ground really quickly. And frankly, if he had an e-bike at that hostel rather than planting it somewhere near the homicide scene, it would be very easily accomplished to take a bike from that hostel down to that location in those same time frames. So kind of left me with it could go either way on how he got from point A to point B. But when I think about the organization of this guy, the reason he had that battery, if in fact it was an e-bike battery, is because he's charging it, because he wants a full charge when he comes out, which kind of pushes me toward the idea is it possible that he had that bike staged down in that alleyway, locked with a cable or something, so that he knew that it would be there? Or did he actually burn some of that battery getting down and risk having that battery run dry heading back? Because 86th and then on to Columbus, where he was staying, that's a pretty long ways pushing a bike really hard.
Let's get back to the timeline. December 4th, approximately 6:39, the shooter arrives at the Hilton, begins to lie in wait. December 4th, 6:44 a.m., that's when he shoots the victim, Brian Thompson, in the back and the calf. December 4th, the suspect flees the scene, crosses the street, travels through the alleyway to West 55th, takes a right, and arrives at 6th Avenue. While in the alleyway, the suspect drops the burner phone. December 4th, now on 6th Avenue, the suspect hops on a bike and rides it north towards Central Park. The suspect enters Central Park at 6:48 a.m., begins riding his bike down Center Drive. The suspect's backpack was later discovered in the park. The suspect exits Central Park at West 77th at 6:56. Then, moving forward to 6:58, he's captured by surveillance riding his bike on 85th Street. Then on December 4th, 7:04, the suspect ditches his bike, enters a taxi on 86th Street that takes him back to the George Washington Bridge bus station. So that's the whole thing. I'll give each of you like 20 seconds to give us a final thought on the planning of this. And Mike Gould, I'll start with you on the escape, on escaping from New York City. They made a movie about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, it goes to his well planning, but eventually when the police were saying he was on his way to Atlanta, they made that public that was their suspicion. He went to Pennsylvania. So he was obviously monitoring things. The biggest thing, Vinny, he kept the gun with him. My view has always been that he wanted to kill more people for notoriety. He would have ditched that gun long before he got caught. That's kind of where I'm seeing this. And that's what his frustration coming out of that police van was, because he got busted before he could kill more people.
Mike King, 10 seconds. Wrap it up right here on this part.
Yeah, he rehearsed and he performed and he did everything to the book. He fell apart in some degrees, and I think we're going to talk a little more about that.
Absolutely. Mike and Mike staying with us. Still to come. What is the most important piece of evidence?
We just didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy.
Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down. Police have arrested Luigi Mangione.
Court TV and Scripps News take you inside the investigation that's captured the nation's attention.
We do not kill people in cold blood.
The motive.
One line reads, these parasites had it coming.
The manhunt.
It feels good to get a guy like that off the street.
And what's next for the accused assassin?
Assassination of a CEO. A Court TV and Scripps News special report. Wednesday at 7 on Court TV.
So whatever we got on scene there, we were able to pretty much find where he was at in the restaurant. And as soon as he was wearing a blue medical mask. As soon as we pulled that down, or we asked him to pull it down, me and my partner and I recognized him immediately, just from what we saw in the media with photos, videos. We just didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy.
There's your Rookie of the Year, folks. Rookie police officer from Altoona who made the arrest of Luigi Mangione. I want you to take a listen to the police commissioner talking about what Luigi Mangione had on him at the time he was arrested.
Upon further investigation, officers recovered a firearm on his person, as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including a mask consistent with those worn by our wanted individual. Also recovered was a fraudulent New Jersey ID, matching the ID our suspect used to check into his New York City hostel before the shooting incident. Additionally, officers recovered a handwritten document that speaks to both his motivation and mindset.
That's a lot of evidence found and seized at the time of the arrest, which brings us to our next question in our investigation, which is, what is the most important piece of evidence? There's a lot of evidence, but what's the most important piece of evidence? Still with us from New York, retired police commander Mike King and retired NYPD officer Mike Gould. Let me just run through a list of some more additional evidence before you guys answer, so you have some more things to choose from, or you can take something that I don't list. In addition to the manifesto was Mangione's to-do list, a notebook allegedly found on Mangione, which contained a to-do list, including this quote: "What do? You whack the CEO at the annual parasitic bean counting convention. It's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence." You've also got all the times that Mangione is spotted on surveillance video, whether it's at the hostel or at the Starbucks, at the scene, riding away, on the bus, in the cab. Then you've got the gun matches the shell casings. The gun found on the suspect matched shell casings found at the site of the shooting. The casings had the words handwritten, deny, defend, and depose on them. Of course, you also have the shooting itself on video as well. Then you've got fingerprints. The lab results matched Luigi Mangione's fingerprints to a water bottle and protein bar wrapper found near the scene of the killing on December the 4th. Of course, you have him on video at the Starbucks purchasing those items. But wait, there's more. Luigi Mangione's fake ID, courtesy of NBC News, that was used to check in, was found on his person. And don't forget, he was also shown on video at the hostel unmasked, flirting. Mike King, Mike Gould. Mike King, I'll let you go first. From your perspective, what's the most important?
Vinnie, yeah, I'm like tossing between the manifesto and the writings and that weapon. And the writings give us his words, his confession, if in fact it's proven to be his handwriting and he's proven to be the killer in this case. But that weapon, I think it held some real significant intrinsic value to him for some reason. We don't know whether he built that 3D weapon, took the time. He talks about the engineering in that manifesto, which makes me think he may have built that weapon. But he used that weapon. It was part of the artist's rendering, and I think it was really important to him, and I think it's going to end up being one of the biggest pieces because it's going to be tied to those bullets and those bullet casings. And why the guy wasn't wearing gloves when he pulled the trigger, I have no idea. But as he cycled those rounds, I can only imagine those bare hands also put those bullets into the gun, and they probably have fingerprints there.
Yeah, and it was cold. I mean, you could wear gloves. No one's going to think anything's unusual.
Crazy.
Unbelievable. Mike Gould, from your perspective, what's the most important piece of evidence?
Right, Vinny. So from the NYPD perspective, they gave the prosecution an early Christmas present by gathering all of this evidence. It's an abundance of evidence. It's more evidence, frankly, that I think you need to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. I agree. The biggest thing is the smoking gun video. We see it. We see the assassination. We just have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is the guy that pulled the trigger. We have the gun. And of course, the manifesto is basically a confession, as Mike said. All the other stuff is icing on the cake. I think I've never seen a homicide with this much evidence, honestly, to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. So this is a slam dunk case. Whether they allow him to cop a plea or not, I don't know how it's going to end up. But yeah, the gun, the manifesto, and the smoking gun video. That's what I think all the prosecution needs.
Yeah, it's rare that you have a case with this many very compelling pieces of evidence, and there may still be some DNA evidence on top of it. They're doing that analysis. You know, one thing I was thinking about was the video from Starbucks, and the reason I'm saying that is that video connects to the water bottle, the protein bar. It puts him in the vicinity of the killing, and then the ID of the suspect in the shooting, because you have the very unique backpack as well. But it's you know, an abundance of evidence, an abundance of very compelling evidence in all this. I'll give you each 15 seconds to kind of wrap this up, Mike. 0 to 10, how compelling is the evidence in this case?
Well, I don't know which Mike you're asking, Vinny,
Mike King,
but I'm going to jump in. But I think the evidence is incredibly compelling, especially the fact that they have tied DNA to put him there at the scene, at least at the scene of that Starbucks, and most likely at the scene with those bullet casings. And then the fact that the guy had the same ID that this guy used at the hostel and then later in Altoona.
We're out of time. Mike King, Mike Gould, great to see you both. Thank you both so much for all your help in this. Really do appreciate. Now, this is a case with direct and circumstantial evidence. And from what little we know, it all seemingly points towards the suspect in this case, Luigi Mangione. Now, every defendant has a defense. Some are better than others. This is one where the defense may have to dig deep, like really deep. And my guess is that deep dive will be inside Mangione's mind. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.